Welcome to Friday Night Frights, where I, the Queen of Scream, and the Screaming Queen host two scary stories for your delight and terror. So dim the lights, sit back, and close your eyes, if you dare.
Our first story of the evening is The Department of Forgotten Things. Janet Reeves had worked at the department for 11 years before she found her son in the files. The department didn't advertise, didn't appear in any government directory. It occupied 3 floors of an office building in Silver Spring, Maryland, accessible only through a specific sequence of elevator buttons that most people's minds refuse to remember. The work was simple, if metaphysically disturbing. Process items that reality had forgotten. Contradictory memories. Objects that existed in some people's recollections, but not in any physical record. People whose existence had been edited out of the timeline through quantum fluctuation or reality drift, or whatever the theoretical physicists called it when causality hiccuped and something just stopped being. Janet's job was to catalog these absences, to document what had been lost, to file away the ghosts of things that reality no longer supported. It was depressing work, but it paid well, and it kept her mind occupied, kept her from thinking about Lucas. Her son, 7 years old, died in a car accident in 2019, 5 years ago. She thought about him every day, every hour, every moment, except when she was filing away other people's forgotten things. Then, for brief stretches, the grief would recede. The absence would be bearable. Until she opened file 3,847,293 and saw his face. The file was thin, recent, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject, Lucas David Reeves. Age, 7, at time of erasure. Date of existence, 2012 to 2019. Cause of erasure, timeline correction following quantum event, QE 2024-0847. Status, forgotten. Attached was a photograph. Lucas, her Lucas, smiling in his soccer uniform. But it was all wrong. The uniform was blue. Lucas's team wore red. The photo showed him standing in front of a house Janet didn't recognize, with a woman who looked almost like Janet, but wasn't quite. Different haircut, different smile, different everything. Janet's hands shook as she read the documentation. Subject existed in Timeline Branch 7 Alpha following quantum divergence in 2011. In this branch, subject Lucas Reeves did not die in 2019 car accident. Subject survived and continued to age normally. However, Timeline Branch 7 Alpha has been recently collapsed and merged with primary timeline due to quantum instability. All unique elements of Branch 7 Alpha, including subject Lucas Reeves, have been forgotten by consensus reality. No physical trace remains. No photographs, no records, no memories, except those held in the quantum buffer. Status: eligible for restoration under Protocol 19, subsection B. Janet stopped breathing. Restoration? There was a restoration protocol? She read it 3 times to make sure she understood. The department didn't just catalog forgotten things. Under certain circumstances, with proper authorization, they could restore them, could pull them back from the quantum buffer and reintegrate them into consensus reality, could make them exist again, could make them have always existed. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the pages. But then she reached the final section. Restoration requirements. Universal balance must be maintained. Restoration of forgotten subject requires equivalent erasure. Mass energy consciousness must balance. Recommended procedure. Identify equivalent subject in current timeline for replacement erasure. Janet stared at the words. To bring Lucas back, this other Lucas, the one who survived, the one who was still 7 in some collapsed timeline, she would have to erase someone else. Someone equivalent. Another 7-year-old child. The universe required balance. You couldn't just add a person. Someone had to be subtracted. She should have closed the file, should have logged it like any other forgotten thing and moved on with her grief. But she didn't. She took the file home, read it obsessively, studied the restoration protocols, researched the mechanics of timeline manipulation and quantum erasure. It was possible. Actually possible. With the right authorizations, the right procedures, she could bring Lucas back. Not her Lucas, not the one who died, but another version. One who'd survived. One who still had a whole life ahead of him. All she had to do was choose which child to erase in his place. Janet told herself she wouldn't do it. She couldn't do it. It was monstrous, unthinkable. But she found herself accessing the department's database anyway, searching for candidates. 7-year-old children, current timeline, living. The database had thousands. She filtered by location. Where should she look? By family structure. Rich, poor. By circumstances. She told herself she was just looking, just curious, just trying to understand the mechanics. But she was shopping, comparing, evaluating which child's absence would cause the least disruption. Which child was the most expendable? Terminal illness, that was the key. If she chose a child who was dying anyway, whose existence would end soon, then wasn't she just accelerating the inevitable? Wasn't that more merciful than erasing a healthy child? Janet found 6 candidates. Children with terminal diagnosis. Months to live, maybe a year. She narrowed it down to 3, then to 1. Emma Holbrook, age 7, stage 4, neuroblastoma. Prognosis, 3 to 6 months. Parents, Jennifer and Mark Holbrook, no siblings. The file included a photo. Emma was bald from chemotherapy, thin, fragile, but smiling. She looked happy despite everything. Janet stared at that smile and told herself, she's going to die anyway. Emma was suffering, dying. Her parents were going to lose her anyway. This way, at least, they wouldn't have to watch her decline, wouldn't have to remember the pain, would just forget. The universe would adjust. Emma would have never existed. No suffering, no grief, no loss. And Lucas would live, would exist, would have the chance Emma was losing anyway. It was practical, logical, the least harmful option. Janet filled out the paperwork, the restoration forms, the erasure authorization. She told herself it was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. Emma was dying. Lucas could live. The universe required balance. This was balance. The authorization process took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Janet double-checking her reasoning, her justification, her moral calculus. Emma was dying anyway. This was mercy. This was practical. This was the least bad option. She repeated it like a mantra. But at night, when she couldn't sleep, she thought about Emma's smile, about parents who didn't know their daughter was about to be erased from existence, about the fact that dying anyway was still living for 3 more months, still having time for final words, final hugs, final I love yous. Time Janet would be stealing. But Lucas deserved time too, deserved a life, deserved to exist. And he'd forgotten through no fault of his own, through quantum chance, through random universal fluctuation. Wasn't it fair to give him another chance? Wasn't it just? The authorization came through on a Tuesday. Approved. Restoration of Lucas David Reeves, Timeline Branch 7 Alpha, authorized. Replacement erasure of Emma Jane Holbrook, Timeline Prime, scheduled for implementation Friday, 3:00 p.m. EST. 2 days. Janet had 2 days to change her mind. She didn't change it. She'd come too far, justified it too thoroughly, convinced herself too completely. This was mercy. This was balance. This was right. Emma was dying anyway. Friday at 3 p.m., Janet sat in the department's implementation room and watched 2 technicians repair the quantum resonance equipment. You understand this procedure? The senior technician asked. At 3:00 p.m. exactly, we'll initiate the swap. Emma Holbrook will be erased from all timelines. Lucas Reeves will be restored to Timeline Prime. Your memories will adjust to accommodate his existence. You'll remember him as your son who survived the accident. The universe will rewrite itself around the change. I understand. And you're certain, once we initiate, there's no reversing it. The choice is permanent. Janet thought about Emma, about her smile, about her parents. Then she thought about Lucas, about having her son back, about a second chance. I'm certain. The technician nodded and checked his watch. 2 minutes. Janet's heart was pounding. This was it. This was the moment. In 2 minutes, Emma would cease to exist, would never have existed, and Lucas would be restored, would be alive, would be hers. 1 minute. Janet closed her eyes, tried not to think about Emma's parents, about the fact that they'd wake up tomorrow with no daughter, no memories of her, just a vague sense of something missing. But they wouldn't grieve, couldn't grieve what they didn't remember. Unlike Janet, who'd been grieving for 5 years. This was fair. This was balanced. 30 seconds. Janet opened her eyes. The quantum equipment was humming. The air felt thick, electric. 10 seconds. She should stop this. Should tell them to abort. Should accept that Lucas was gone and Emma deserved to live whatever time she had left. 5. But she didn't stop it. 4. She chose herself over Emma. 3. Chose her grief over someone else's life. 2. Chose Lucas. 1. The equipment flared. The air bent. Janet felt reality shift, like the world was a photograph being slightly adjusted. Swamp complete, the technician said. Emma Holbrook has been erased. Lucas Reeves has been restored. Integration processing now. Janet waited for her memories to adjust, for the version of herself who never lost Lucas to overwrite the version who had. She waited and waited. Why isn't it? She started. Then the memories hit. But they were wrong. She remembered Lucas surviving the car accident in 2019. Remembered him growing up. Remembered 5 more years with him. But she also remembered him dying. Not in the car accident, in a different accident. A different way. Lucas, at age 9, drowning in the community pool, 2021. No, wait. Lucas at age 10, falling from a tree, 2022. No, Lucas at age 11, hit by a car while riding his bike, 2023. No, Lucas diagnosed with neuroblastoma at age 6, dying at age 7 after months of chemotherapy, 2019. No, Lucas. The memories kept coming, overlapping, contradicting. Every possible death, every possible loss, every timeline where Lucas existed but didn't survive to present day. She remembered all of them simultaneously. 100 different losses, 100 different griefs. Because the universe had balanced. She'd restored Lucas, but the universe couldn't let her keep him. Causality wouldn't support it. He was supposed to be gone. The quantum event that created Timeline Branch 7 Alpha had been corrected for a reason. So the universe gave her Lucas back, and then took him away. Over and over and over. In every possible timeline, in every possible way. She killed Emma for nothing. Worse than nothing. The technician was staring at his monitor. That's, not supposed to happen. The integration should result in one coherent timeline. Why is she receiving multiple? Abort, the other technician said. Abort now, something's wrong. But it was too late. Janet was experiencing every possible version of losing Lucas. Every grief, every loss, every funeral, every moment of finding him dead. 100 sons, 100 deaths, 100 absences. All at once, all forever. She screamed. Department of Forgotten Things, Incident Report. Date, redacted. Incident, catastrophic integration failure during restoration procedure. Subject, Janet Reeves, processing clerk, GS11. Details. Clerk Reeves obtained unauthorized access to restoration protocols and initiated swap procedure to restore forgotten son Lucas Reeves, Timeline Branch 7 Alpha, in exchange for erasure of Emma Holbrook, Timeline Prime. Procedure executed successfully. Emma Holbrook erased. Lucas Reeves is restored. However, quantum stability analysis revealed that Lucas Reeves exists in a causality loop. His existence in any timeline inevitably leads to his death before present day. The universe autocorrects. Restoration merely delayed the inevitable erasure. Rather than experiencing one restored timeline with living son, Clerk Reeves is now experiencing all possible timelines simultaneously. She remembers Lucas surviving. She remembers every subsequent death. She remembers every possible loss. Quantum superposition of grief. Clerk Reeves is currently non-responsive. Catatonic. Brain scans show simultaneous processing of hundreds of contradictory memory streams. All involve the death of her son. All are equally real to her. Medical team states prognosis is poor. The human brain cannot sustain this level of contradictory trauma indefinitely. Status of Emma Holbrook. Erased. Never existed. Parents have no memory of daughter. Terminal illness that should have killed Emma in 3 months was transferred to Janet Reeves. Quantum balance requirement. Suffering must be conserved. Reeves is now dying of neuroblastoma. Prognosis, 3 to 6 months. Recommendations. Clerk Reeves to be placed on permanent medical leave. Number 2. Restoration protocols to be restricted. No further personnel-related restorations permitted. Number 3. Emma Holbrook case to be filed as acceptable loss. Universe has balanced. No further action recommended. Note: the universe does not permit paradox. Lucas Reeves was meant to be forgotten. Attempting to restore him only resulted in experiencing his loss infinite times. Clerk Reeves exchanged one grief for infinite grief. Exchanged one dead child, Emma, for infinite dead children. all possible Lucases. The universe balanced, but not in the way she expected. Addendum. Clerk Reeves died 3 months after incident. Neuroblastoma. In her final days, she spoke constantly of Lucas, of all the Lucases, of every way she'd lost him, of every funeral she attended, of every timeline where she'd failed to save him. Medical staff reports she called out for Emma repeatedly, asked for forgiveness, said she understood now, said it wasn't worth it, said she'd give anything to undo her choice. But the universe doesn't permit undoing, only balancing. Emma Holbrook remains erased. Lucas Reeves remains forgotten. Janet Reeves is dead. Balance achieved. In the Department of Forgotten Things, a new file was created. Subject, Janet Marie Reeves. Age, 43, at time of erasure. Date of existence, 1981 to 2024. Cause of erasure, quantum bouncing follow unauthorized restoration attempt. Status, forgotten. The universe had adjusted. Janet's co-workers didn't remember her. Her apartment lease had never existed. Her employment records had vanished. Only the department files remained. Documentation of a woman who tried to cheat reality, who'd erased a dying child to restore her son, who discovered too late that some losses can't be undone, that the universe always balances, but never in the way you expect, never in the way you want, only in the way that preserves the fundamental rule. You cannot create from nothing. You cannot destroy into nothing. You can only exchange, only transfer, only balance. Janet had wanted her son back. The universe gave her infinite sons, and infinite ways to lose them, all at once, forever, until her mind broke, until the cancer took her, until she was forgotten too. Erased like Emma, erased like Lucas, erased like everyone who tries to break the balance. The universe doesn't forgive, it only corrects. And somewhere in the quantum buffer, in the space between timelines, in the files of the Department of Forgotten Things, 3 ghosts remain. Emma, who was erased to fuel a restoration that failed. Lucas, who exists in infinite timelines but survives in none. Janet, who chose wrong and paid infinitely for it. All of them forgotten. All of them balanced. All of them gone. The universe is satisfied. The books are balanced. The department files the documentation and moves on. There are always more forgotten things. Always more people trying to restore what's lost. Always more attempts to cheat reality. And the universe always balances, always corrects, always wins. Janet Reeves learned that in the end, in every end, in infinite ends. The universe balanced and she paid the price. For Emma, for Lucas, for herself. Forever forgotten, forever erased, forever balanced. The department closes the file, the universe moves on, And in the space between timelines where the forgotten things wait, a mother experiences infinite grief. A child who was dying anyway was erased for nothing. A son who could never survive exists in infinite deaths. All of them gone, all of them balanced, all of them the price of trying to cheat what is. The universe doesn't negotiate, it only balances. Remember that. Before you try to restore what's lost, before you erase what's living, before you think you can outsmart causality, the universe always balances. Janet Reeves knows that now and knows it forever.
Are you really a horror fan? Let's see with this trivia quiz. It starts easy but gets harder. Can you get them all?
So, how did you do? Are you really a horror fan? Don't worry. If you missed a few, we can help you brush up on your horror knowledge. Class is in session.
The Bride Who Never Left. Based on a true story of alleged paranormal hauntings in the Banff Springs Hotel in Canada. The wedding was supposed to be perfect. June 12, 1928. The Banff Springs Hotel at the height of its grandeur. The Canadian Rockies rising like cathedrals beyond the windows. The ballroom was decorated with bright roses and ribbons, the finest champagne, the best orchestra in Alberta. Everything money could buy, everything a young bride could dream of. Her name was Dorothy. She was 22 years old, beautiful in the way wealthy young women of the 1920s were beautiful. Pale skin, dark hair, marceled into perfect waves, lips painted like crimson. Her wedding dress was imported from Paris, white silk, delicate lace, a train that stretched 12 feet behind her. Too long, her mother had said. You'll trip on it. Dorothy had laughed. She never tripped. She was graceful, elegant. She'd spent years learning to dance, to move, to inhabit expensive clothes with the confidence of old money. She didn't know that grace fails at the worst moments. The ceremony was perfect. The vows were exchanged. The kiss was witnessed by 200 guests. Applause echoing through the ballroom. Dorothy's new husband, James, heir to a railroad fortune, beaming with pride and champagne. They were going to dance, the first dance, the moment Dorothy had been anticipating for months. She'd practiced with her gramophone in her bedroom, knew every step, every turn. She would be perfect. She descended the grand staircase, James waiting at the bottom. The orchestra was ready. The guests were watching. Halfway down, her heel caught the train. Just a tiny snag. The lace caught on the edge of her shoe. Barely noticeable. But physics doesn't care about weddings, about perfect moments, about dreams. Dorothy pitched forward. She grabbed for the railing, missed. The weight of the dress, all that beautiful expensive silk, pulled her off balance. She fell. Down the marble stairs, tumbling. The train tangled around her legs. Her head struck the banister, once, twice. The crack of bone was audible even over the orchestra's opening notes. She landed at the bottom in a pool of white silk, her neck bent at an angle that made the guests gasp, made James stumble backward, made Dorothy's mother scream. The impact had snapped her neck, killed her instantly. But Dorothy's last thought, her final conscious moment, wasn't of pain or fear. It was frustration. I never got to dance the first night. They canceled the reception, and of course they did. Covered Dorothy's body with a sheet, carried her to one of the hotel suites, called the doctor who could only confirm what everyone already knew. Dead. Broken neck. Tragic accident. James sat in another suite, trembling, drinking whiskey his groomsmen kept pouring, in shock, unable to process that his wedding day had become a funeral. The guests left quietly, horrified, whispering. This would be the story they'd tell for years. The wedding where the bride died on the stairs. The hotel staff cleaned the ballroom, put away the decorations, the flowers, the champagne, the wedding cake no one had touched and ever would. By midnight, the ballroom was empty, dark, silent. But at 12:47 a.m., the orchestra began to play. The night manager heard it at first, music coming from the ballroom. He locked it himself. He checked it. Empty. But the music was real, a waltz. The same waltz that had been planned for Dorothy's first dance. He unlocked the ballroom. The door swung open. The room was empty. But the music played on, coming from nowhere, from everywhere. The sound of a full orchestra performing for an invisible audience. Then he saw her. In the center of the ballroom, dancing, alone, was Dorothy in her wedding dress. The train swirled around her. Her movements were perfect, graceful, everything she'd practiced, everything she'd dreamed. She was smiling. The manager's blood turned to ice. He'd seen her body, seen the broken neck, the awkward angle of her head. But she was dancing. Her head tilted wrong, still broken, but she was dancing around it, compensating for the injury, even in death, determined not to let it ruin her performance. She spun, dipped, waltzed with an invisible partner. The manager backed out of the ballroom, locked the doors with shaking hands. The music continued until dawn. The honeymoon suite. Dorothy's body lay in suite 873, the honeymoon suite, the room she should have shared with James on their wedding night. Instead, she was there alone, covered, waiting for a family to arrange transport home. But Dorothy wasn't ready to leave. At 3 a.m., the maid entering to check the room stopped in the doorway. The body was gone. Not removed, not taken by family, just gone. The sheet that had covered her lay on the bed, neat, folded, as if Dorothy had simply gotten up and arranged things, then left. The maid searched the suite. She found nothing. She reported it to the night manager. They searched the entire floor, the hotel, nothing. But when they returned to suite 873, the body was back, exactly as it had been, covered, still, dead. The maid swore she'd checked that room, swore that the body hadn't been there. The night manager said nothing. He'd seen her in the ballroom, knew she was moving somehow. The next night, a different maid saw her. Dorothy in front of the mirror in suite 873, wearing her wedding dress and adjusting her veil and practicing her smile. The maid screamed. Dorothy turned, looked at her. Her head was still tilted wrong, broken, but her eyes were focused, aware. "Is it time?" Dorothy asked. Her voice was soft, distant. "Is James waiting? Is the orchestra ready?" You're dead," the maid whispered. Dorothy looked confused, touched her neck, felt the angle, frowned. "Oh," she said. "Oh, I see." She turned back to the mirror, tried to straighten her head. It wouldn't move. The bones were broken, fused in death at that terrible angle. Dorothy stared at her reflection, at the wrongness of her neck, at the ruined perfection. Then she started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears running down her pale face. The tears of a young woman who lost everything in an instant, who died before living, who'd never get her perfect moment. The maid ran. When the manager checked the suite, Dorothy was gone again, just the body, covered, still. The staircase. Dorothy began to haunt the staircase where she'd fallen. Staff working late would hear footsteps, light, quick, the sound of someone descending in heeled shoes. They'd look up, see nothing, but they'd feel her passing, a cold breeze, the scent of roses, the whisper of silk against marble. She was walking down the stairs over and over, practicing, trying to get it right this time, trying to make it to the bottom without falling. Sometimes they'd hear the fall, the tumble, the crack, the thud at the bottom, then silence. Then footsteps ascending, slowly, heavily, the sound of someone climbing back up again and again, to try again. She was trapped in a loop, reliving her death, trying to change it, trying to reach the bottom gracefully, to complete the descent, to get to James, to dance. But it always ended the same way. The catch, the fall, the crack. Over and over, forever. The ballroom dancer. But it was in the ballroom that Dorothy truly lived, or whatever the dead do that resembles the living. Every night, without fail, she would appear. Sometimes at midnight, sometimes at 3 a.m., always alone, always in her wedding dress. The orchestra that played for her was invisible, but the music was real. Staff heard it. Guests heard it. The same waltz, the first dance song, playing on ethereal instruments that existed somewhere between worlds. Dorothy would dance for hours, spinning, dipping, moving through the steps she practiced. Her invisible partner, always perfect, always in sync, always there even though he wasn't. James had left the hotel the day after her death and never returned. He married someone else 2 years later, lived a long life, died in 1976. But in death, Dorothy didn't need the real James. She had the perfect James, the one who existed only in her imagination. The perfect husband, the perfect partner, the one who would dance with her forever. Her head still tilted at that wrong angle, still broken, but she'd learned to incorporate it into her movements, to make it part of the dance. Her neck bent impossibly, but her feet were perfect. Her turns were flawless. She'd achieved in death what she dreamed of in life. Perfection. Except for the neck. That would never heal, never straighten. A permanent reminder of the moment everything went wrong. The dress. Dorothy's wedding dress began to decay. Not the body. That had been buried finally after 3 days of mysterious disappearances and reappearances in Suite 873. The ghostly dress. The one she wore while dancing, while haunting. It aged while she didn't. The silk yellowed, the lace frayed. Bloodstains appeared at the hem, blood that had been there in life, blood from the fall, blood that seeped through from the memory of her death. The dress became a horror. Beautiful from a distance, terrible up close. By 1950, witnesses described it as rotting, the lace torn, the silk stained brown and red, the train dragging heavily, as if soaked with something thick. But Dorothy didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. She was focused on the dance, on the movement, on the perfection she could achieve in death that had been denied her in life. The dress continued to deteriorate. By 1980, it was barely recognizable as a wedding gown, more like a burial shroud. Tattered, stained, horrible. But still she danced in it. Still she twirled. till she smiled that bright smile, oblivious to how she'd changed, how death had transformed her from beautiful to grotesque. Or perhaps she knew. Perhaps she didn't care. Because in the moment of dancing, in those hours when the invisible orchestra played and her invisible groom held her, she was alive again, young again, perfect again, except for the neck. Oh, except for the neck. The others she found. Dorothy wasn't alone in the hotel. The Banff Springs had collected other ghosts over the decades. A bellman, a bride from an earlier era, a bartender who died in the 1930s. Dorothy found them, invited them to her nightly dances. The ballroom began to fill with translucent figures, all dancing, all swaying to the invisible orchestra, a gathering of the dead pretending they were alive, pretending they were celebrating. The bellman danced with the earlier bride. The bartender danced alone, swaying to music only he could hear. And Dorothy danced with her invisible James. Always with James, the one who existed only in her death, who was perfect in a way the real James never could have been. They were a community of the forgotten, the tragic, the ones who died at the hotel and couldn't leave, who were bound by violent ends or unfinished business, or simple inability to let go. Dorothy was their queen, their hostess. It was her music that played, her dance that set the rhythm, her death that had started it all. She welcomed each new guest, taught them the steps, and included them in her eternal reception. Because if she had to dance forever, if she had to be trapped in this moment, at least she wouldn't be alone. At least someone would witness her perfection. At least her wedding would finally happen, even if it took a century, even if all the guests were dead, even if the groom wasn't real. The hotel's response. The Banff Springs Hotel never officially acknowledged Dorothy. No plaques, no markers, no mention in the official history. But the staff knew. Everyone who worked there knew. The ballroom was never used after midnight, ever. Even for New Year's Eve parties, even for the biggest events. Because Dorothy needed her time, her space, her dance. Suite 873 was renovated and renumbered. She died there, and death, for Dorothy, wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning of the longest wedding reception in history. Present day. Dorothy still dances. Nearly a century has passed. The world has changed beyond recognition from 1928. Jazz gave way to rock, to disco, to hip-hop. Hemlines rose and fell. Wars came and went. Technology transformed everything. But in the ballroom of the Banff Springs Hotel, nothing has changed. The invisible orchestra still plays the same waltz, the same first dance song. Dorothy still appears, still wearing the rotted remains of her wedding dress, still with her head tilted at that terrible broken angle, still dancing with an invisible partner who never disappoints, never leaves, never dies. She doesn't speak to the living anymore, doesn't seem to even see them. She's lost in her eternal moment, her perfect dance, her wedding that never ends. The other ghosts still join her, the dead community growing slowly, adding members decade by decade, all of them swaying to music the living can barely hear, all of them trapped in the moments they died, the moments that define them, the moments they can't escape. For Dorothy, that moment is descent, the walk down the stairs, the fall, the dance she never got to perform. She's been walking down those stairs for 96 years, falling, getting up, trying again. She's been dancing in that ballroom for 96 years. Perfect steps, perfect grace, perfect except for the broken neck. And she'll keep dancing, keep falling, keep trying to get it right, forever. Because some brides never leave their weddings. Some first dances never end. Some deaths are just the beginning of the longest night. Dorothy's night, her wedding night, her death night, her eternal night, it will never see morning. The orchestra will never stop playing, the guests will never leave, and the bride will never, ever stop dancing, even when the dress is completely rotted away, even when her memory has faded from everyone who knew her, even when the hotel itself eventually crumbles. She'll still be there, somewhere, dancing, with her head tilted wrong, with her invisible groom, with a smile on her pale dead face, dancing forever. Disclaimer. This is a fictionalized account based on the legend of the Ghost Bride at the Banff Springs Hotel in Banff, Alberta, Canada. The hotel, built in 1888 and expanded over the decades, is a real historic landmark. The story of a bride who fell down the staircase on her wedding day and now haunts the hotel is part of local legend and ghost tour narratives. While the hotel does have a reputation for paranormal activity, the specific character of Dorothy, the details of her death, and the supernatural elements in the story are fictional creations. The date, names, and specific incidents have been created for narrative purposes. No documented evidence exists of such a death occurring at the hotel.